The village of Amuru was small, quiet, and full of life. People lived in mud houses with thatched roofs. Children ran barefoot on red sand. Women sang while pounding yams. Men laughed under trees while playing drafts. But in Amuru, there was one thing that was more important than anything else: hair. In this village, a girl's beauty was not by her face or her clothes. It was her hair. Long, thick, black hair. If your hair was long, people respected you. If it was full and shiny, they called you beautiful. If it touched your back, they said the gods had blessed you. The women of Amuru took hair seriously. They washed it with rice water. They rubbed in coconut oil, palm kernel oil, and shea butter. Some used clove water, chebe powder, aloe vera, and onion juice. Every girl had her special mixture. They would sit for hours, combing, twisting, and oiling. Even people from other villages talked about Amuru. They said, "The girls in Amuru are born with hair like river ropes." Some were jealous, some tried to copy them, but Amuru girls believed their hair was a gift from the gods. And the most admired girl in the whole village was Amaka. Amaka had the longest hair. It flowed like water when she walked. It touched her waist, thick and black. When she combed it outside her hut, children would stop playing. Women would come closer, pretending to greet her, but their eyes were on her hair. Amaka knew she was beautiful, and she was proud. She walked with her head high. She smiled only when she wanted to. When people praised her hair, she didn't pretend to be shy. She nodded and said, "Yes, I take care of it well." Every morning she sat outside with her mirror and comb. She took her time. She liked when people looked at her. She liked feeling special. Her mother would call her to help with housework, but she would say, "Mama, I must finish my hair first." Amaka believed she was better than the other girls. She believed her hair made her special. And in Amuru, that meant everything. There was a tradition in the village. Whenever the prince of Amuru was ready to choose a wife, all the maidens would line up. The girl with the most beautiful hair would be chosen. This only happened once in a lifetime, because there was only one prince in each generation. Now, the time had come. The prince had returned from the city. Everyone knew what that meant. The competition would begin soon. Every girl started taking extra care of her hair. They used more oil, they combed more, they braided and washed. But deep down they all knew Amaka would win. Her hair was too perfect. People called her the queen already. She smiled when she heard that. She believed it too. But far away, in a quiet corner of the village, someone else was watching Amaka. Chika was watching her walk, watching her hair move, watching and burning inside. Chika and Amaka grew up like sisters. They played together, fetched water together, even shared meals from the same plate. But while they laughed and hugged in public, Chika hid something deep in her heart, a feeling that hurt like fire: jealousy. Chika's hair was also long. In fact, it was almost the same length as Amaka's, only a little bit shorter, but that little bit felt like a mountain to her. Every time Amaka sat in front of her mirror, combing her hair slowly, showing off without saying a word, Chika's chest would tighten. And when Amaka said things like, "Nobody in this village can match my hair," Chika would smile and reply, "You're right, my friend. You'll be queen for sure." But inside, she wanted to scream. She didn't want Amaka to be queen. She wanted to be the queen. She wanted to walk before the prince. She wanted the drums to beat for her. She wanted the village to say her name in songs. At night, when everyone else slept, Chika stayed awake, touching her hair, measuring it with her hands, stretching it, hoping it had grown even just 1 inch. She tried everything. She soaked her hair in onion juice till her eyes burned. She boiled ginger and cloves and poured them on her scalp. She mixed eggs, honey, and aloe vera into her hair, even when it smelled terrible. She rubbed in oils till her pillow was always greasy. Nothing worked. Her hair stayed the same. One morning, after washing her hair with fermented rice water for the 10th time, she cried. Not because of the smell, because she was tired. Tired of not being enough. Tired of being second. Tired of hiding how she really felt. Her mother noticed her sadness and sat beside her. "My daughter," she said gently, "your hair is beautiful. You are beautiful. Why not be thankful for what the gods have given you? But Chica pulled away and shook her head. I don't want to be beautiful, she whispered. I want to be the most beautiful. I want to win. I want to be seen. Her mother sighed but said nothing more. From that day, something changed in Chica. She still smiled at Amaka, still called her my friend, still said things like, "You'll shine like the moon on the prince's wedding day." But now her smile was sharp, her hugs were tight, and her eyes never left Amaka's hair. She started dreaming of ways to win. She would touch her own hair and say to herself, I just need to pass her by 1 inch, just 1 inch. She didn't care how. She didn't care what it would cost. She was ready to do anything. While the other girls chase beauty, one girl walks a different path. Her name was Adana. She lived in a small hut at the edge of Amuru, near the wide path that led into the bush. She was an orphan. Both her parents had died when she was just a baby. The villagers helped raise her, but not all of them were kind. Some pitied her, others just ignored her. And many mocked her. Not because she was rude, not because she caused trouble, but because of her hair. Adana had the shortest hair in the whole village. It barely reached her ears. It was thick and healthy, but no matter what she tried, it never grew long like the other girls. While other maidens braided their hair and showed it off, Adana's hair stayed the same. Some of the girls whispered when she walked past. Look at her. No wonder her parents left her. Even the gods didn't give her hair. Who will marry her? She looks like a boy. At first, the words hurt. Deep. She would cry alone at night, hugging herself in the dark. She would try rubbing oil on her scalp and praying for a miracle, but nothing changed. So, she changed. She stopped trying to please people. She stopped crying. She looked at herself in the mirror one morning and said out loud, "Hair is not heart, and I have a good heart." From that day, Adana walked differently. She no longer tied a scarf to hide her hair. She wore it proudly, just the way it was. She held her head high and let the wind touch it freely. The other maidens refused to be friends with her. Some of them, including Chica and Amaka, would laugh at her whenever they saw her at the village stream. "Are you sure you're even a girl?" Chica once said, laughing. "Maybe when your hair grows, the gods will remember you," Amaka added, flipping her own long hair. Adana didn't reply. She just smiled softly and continued washing her clothes. She spent her days working on the farm. Her hands were strong. She could carry heavy baskets of yams and still have energy to help old Mama Neka with her firewood. At the market, she helped women arrange their goods. She would sing to their babies so they could rest. Children loved her. Elders blessed her. She didn't have friends among the other girls, but she had something else: respect from those who truly mattered. And when she was alone, she found joy in the things the others didn't notice. She would sit by the stream, watching the water flow. She listened to the birds sing and smiled. She fed little goats and shared her food with stray dogs. She whispered to trees and felt like they listened. Adana believed that true beauty was in how you treated people. That a kind word was more powerful than a pretty face. That a clean heart was better than long hair. So while the village focused on hair and who would marry the prince, Adana just lived her life, quietly, kindly, gently. Even though the other maidens still mocked her, even though Chica and Amaka still laughed at her by the stream, she didn't stop being kind. She didn't stop being herself. She woke up early every morning to sweep her compound, fetch water from the stream, and tend to her small farm. Her days were full of work, but her heart stayed soft. She helped anyone who needed her. She smiled at strangers. She forgave those who didn't deserve it. One hot afternoon, while she was cutting firewood deep inside the bush, she heard a soft groan. It came from behind some tall grass. She dropped her machete and followed the sound carefully. There, lying on the ground, was a young man. He looked tired. His clothes were dusty. His left leg was bruised and bleeding. His eyes were half closed, but when he saw her, he tried to sit up. Adana rushed to him. "Don't move," she said gently. "You're hurt." He tried to speak, but his voice was weak. Without asking too many questions, Adana tore a piece of her wrapper and wrapped his wound. She helped him sit under a tree and gave him water from her calabash. Then, slowly, she helped him walk back to her small hut. She cleaned his wounds, gave him warm water to bathe, cooked the little yam she had and shared it with him. "What's your name?" she asked as they ate. "Obina," he said with a soft smile. "Thank you for everything." He was handsome. His eyes were calm, his smile kind. He didn't look at her hair. He didn't ask why she had no friends. He didn't laugh like the others. He looked at her. Not her head, not her hair. Just her. In the days that followed, they laughed together. He helped her in the garden. She taught him how to cook bitter leaf soup. They sat under the moonlight and talked for hours. He told her stories about places she had never seen. She told him about the stars and the names she gave to the trees around her house. For the first time in her life, Adana wasn't alone. She didn't want to ask too many questions about who he was or where he came from. She just enjoyed the moments. She cherished the peace. But one morning, everything changed. Adana had gone to the market early to buy palm oil and salt. When she returned, Obina was gone. His mat was empty. His clothes were gone. No note, no message, no farewell. Just silence. She stood there for a long time holding her basket of food, hoping maybe he had just stepped out. Maybe he went to fetch water. Maybe. But as the sun began to set, she knew. He was not coming back. Her chest felt heavy. She sat in the doorway and let her tears fall silently. She didn't understand why he left without saying goodbye. She didn't know if she had done something wrong. She just felt empty. But after a few days, she stood up again. She cleaned the room, packed the mat, went back to her farm. She smiled at the trees again. Maybe he was never meant to stay, she whispered to herself. Maybe he was just passing through. But deep down, she missed him. And she wished he would have stayed even if it's just a while longer. The days after Obina left were quiet again. Adana returned to her normal routine, early morning farm work, quiet meals, helping the elders. She smiled at the sky, but deep in her heart, she still felt his absence. The village was slowly returning to its old rhythm. Then, she came. It was a warm afternoon. The market was just beginning to calm down when people saw a small cart at the village gate. 2 spotless white goats pulled it gently, and sitting inside was a woman wrapped in glowing red cloth, her wrists full of golden bangles that chimed with every move. Her hair was the first thing people saw. Long, thicker than rope, blacker than coal. It flowed behind her like a river of night. The villagers couldn't stop staring. Women paused their sweeping. Children forgot their games. Even the palm trees seemed to lean closer. Her name was Zaraki, but with a smile that showed perfect white teeth, she said, "Call me Zira." By evening, she had taken over an empty hut near the market square and painted it bright orange and yellow. She called it the House of Hair Wonders. Inside, she placed shiny mirrors, soft cushions, and small jars filled with colorful oils. "These are not just any oils," she said, her voice smooth like warm honey. "They are from far, far away lands, where hair grows overnight and never breaks." The maidens gathered around her, wide-eyed, their mouths open like baby birds. Some touched their own hair and frowned. Others whispered, "Maybe she can help me win." And then came Chika. Her heart had been restless since the day she saw Amaka's hair flow in the wind. She had tried everything. Nothing worked. But now, here was Zira, with magic oils, with promise in her eyes. Chika was the first to step inside. She sat quietly as Zira touched her hair, hummed a strange tune, and rubbed in warm oil that smelled like flowers and fire. Chika closed her eyes and smiled, imagining herself on the day of the festival to choose the next queen. Her hair longer than Amaka's, her face glowing, the village cheering her name. When Zira finished, she handed Chika a small bottle. "Rub this every night," she whispered, "and you will become unforgettable." Chika didn't sleep that night. She stood in front of her mirror holding the bottle, her heart beating fast. She believed, she wanted to believe. And the next morning when she looked at her hair,
It looked shinier, fuller, or maybe it was just the way the sun hit it. She smiled to herself. "I will win," she said. "I will finally win." The sun had barely risen when Chica stepped out of her hut. She walked slowly, knowing everyone was watching, and they were. Her hair had changed. It now flowed down her back, longer than Amaka's, fuller, darker, and more beautiful than anything the village had ever seen. It moved like it had life. It shimmered like oil in water. The girls stared in shock. Even Amaka, who never looked twice at anyone, paused and blinked. The boys couldn't stop looking. Some followed her around. Others offered to help her carry her basket or fetch water. When she passed by the stream, the other girls stepped aside to let her bend first. Even the women at the market whispered, "Maybe she will be the queen after all." Chica smiled. For the first time in her life, she felt like the most important girl in the village. She wore new wrappers, spoke gently, and walked like a bird floating on air. She began to avoid Amaka's eyes. She stopped greeting Adana altogether. She visited Zira the next morning, thanking her, bringing her roasted plantain, kola nuts, and drinks. Zira only smiled and said, "I told you, you will become unforgettable." But then, on the 7th day, everything changed. It started small. A strand of hair on her pillow, then another on her comb, then more on the floor. Chica tried to ignore it. She tied her scarf tighter, she rubbed more oil, she prayed louder. But the next morning she woke up and reached for her hair. And felt nothing. Her head was bare, smooth, completely bald. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her mouth opened to scream, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with tears, but she wiped them quickly. She couldn't believe it. Her beautiful hair was gone. The same hair that made the village notice her. The same hair that gave her pride. The same hair that finally made her feel like she mattered. Gone. She tied her scarf and sat on the floor for hours. She didn't speak. She didn't eat. When her mother asked what was wrong, she said she was tired. She didn't go to Zira. She didn't tell anyone, hoping that if she hid herself long enough it would grow back. Not even her closest cousin. She just sat there, quiet and broken. Every time someone laughed outside, she thought it was about her. Every time someone knocked, she hid. Every time she saw her reflection, she looked away. The village still saw her as the girl with the longest hair, but she knew the truth. And the fear in her heart whispered something worse. What if it never grows back? Chica kept her scarf tight. She smiled when people waved. She laughed when girls said her hair was still the best. But inside, she was drowning. She didn't say a word about what had happened to her. She told herself it was just her. Maybe she had done something wrong. Maybe the oil was too much. Maybe Zira could fix it later. She just needed time. But outside her hut, the whispers had already started. Did you see Chica? She doesn't take off her scarf anymore. She used to show her hair every day. Why is she hiding it now? But Chica said nothing. She avoided Zira's salon. She avoided everyone. Still, the memory of her transformation was too strong, too tempting, and the other maidens had seen it with their own eyes. Even Amaka. Amaka, who had once walked with pride, now saw the way people stared at Chica. She didn't like the way boys laughed more around her. She didn't like that the younger girls were now calling Chica the future queen. So, she went to Zira. She sat on the same cushion Chica once sat on. She let Zira rub warm oil into her scalp. She smiled politely as Zira whispered things like, "Your beauty will shine brighter than ever." And when she walked out of the salon, her hair was longer, thicker, and fuller than ever before. She looked into the mirror and grinned. "Let's see who they talk about now," she whispered. Soon, all the other maidens followed. One after the other, they lined up outside Zira's salon. Even those who once said, "I will never use strange oils," found themselves sitting in her chair. They wanted longer hair. They wanted beauty. They wanted to be noticed. Except Adana. She passed by the salon many times. Zira once even called her over. "You don't want longer hair?" Zira asked, smiling. Adana shook her head gently. "I'm fine with what I have." The girls laughed. "She has nothing and says she's fine," Imagine. But Adana just smiled and walked on. She remembered Obina, the stranger she helped, the only one who had ever looked at her like she mattered. He didn't care about her hair. He cared about her heart. So, she stayed away. And then, it began. One by one, the girls started losing their hair. First it was small, a few strands on the comb, a little patch missing. Then bigger clumps, then full baldness. They cried in silence. They stopped going out. They avoided each other. Some tried to ask Zira for help. But Zira would only smile and say, "It is the magic working. Your beauty is preparing to return in triple folds." They wanted to believe her, but deep down, in the corners of their hearts, fear was growing. The once lively songs of Amuru's maidens faded into whispers. Laughter stopped. The sound of combs in the morning vanished. The girls no longer sat outside their huts to show off their hair. Something was wrong and everyone felt it. One by one, the maidens who had once walked proudly with shining hair now kept their heads down. Scarves were tied tighter, smiles became forced. They still greeted each other at the stream, still passed each other at the market, but their eyes no longer met. They were all hiding the same shame. Some of the girls couldn't take it anymore. They gathered courage and returned to Zira. "My hair has vanished," one whispered, tears in her eyes. Zira only looked at them with calm eyes and a slow smile. "Maybe you didn't follow the rules," she said sweetly. "Maybe you used too much, or too little, or didn't believe enough." They blinked in confusion. "But you said it would grow back in triple folds," one cried. Zira's voice turned cold for a moment. "I never said how long it would take. Beauty needs patience." She turned away from them, her own hair swaying like a curtain of midnight. She had not lost a single strand. Zira walked around the village boldly, her hair more beautiful than ever, long, full, powerful, as if she was mocking them all without saying a word. The girls watched her and doubted themselves. Maybe I really didn't do it right. Maybe I touched water too early. Maybe I didn't pray before using it. No one dared to blame her. No one dared to speak aloud. They all believed somehow that they were the problem. As the festival day drew closer, the day the prince would return and choose his bride, fear began to rise like smoke. The village buzzed with preparation. Drummers practiced, hunters decorated the square, the elders cleaned the palace floor. Everyone was excited. Everyone, except the maidens. They moved around like shadows. Their once sparkling eyes were now dull. They all tied scarves, colorful and bright. No one said the truth. No one asked questions. They all kept the secret. Even Amaka, once the pride of the village, now walked silently with her scarf tight and her head low. They waited. They prayed. They hoped that somehow, before the festival, something would change. The sun rose slowly on the day of the festival, but it did not feel like a normal morning. Drums beat loudly across Amuru. The villagers danced and sang, preparing for the grandest event in many years. Colorful cloths waved in the wind. Yam porridge bubbled in clay pots. The palace square was decorated with fresh palm leaves and red earth flowers. Elders wore white. Children ran around, their faces painted in celebration. Even kings and queens from neighboring villages arrived. They had heard about the beautiful maidens of Amuru, known far and wide for their long, powerful hair. They came with gifts and praise, excited to witness beauty that stories had described like poetry. But something was wrong. The maidens of Amuru, who should have been glowing with pride, walked like ghosts. Their eyes were quiet, their steps slow. They all wore scarves, bright, colorful, perfectly tied. But underneath those scarves was fear. Adana stood in the crowd, watching from the back. She wore her short hair just as it was. No scarf, no shame. But she could feel the heaviness in the air. She could hear the silence in the footsteps. When the king stepped forward, the drummers stopped. He raised his hand and smiled proudly. Today,
We will witness beauty. We will see the maidens of Amuru shine brighter than ever before. Let the maidens come forward." The crowd clapped and cheered. One by one, the maidens stepped into the open space, Amaka, Chika, and the others. But they did not smile. They did not dance. They stood still, their scarves hiding what they could no longer face. The king looked at them, confused. "Why are your heads covered? On this day your hair is your crown. Remove your scarves and let us see the beauty the gods have blessed you with." The maidens froze. Chika glanced at Amaka. Amaka looked down. One of the girls bit her lip to stop her tears. Another began to shake. The king raised his voice. "I said, remove your scarves." Slowly, with trembling hands, they obeyed. One after the other, the scarves fell to the ground, and what was revealed turned joy into silence. They were all bald, every single one. No braids, no coils, no shine, only smooth heads and broken hearts. A heavy silence fell across the square. The visitors gasped. The elders looked at each other. The drummers lowered their sticks. The king's face turned red. "What is this disgrace?" he thundered. "Where is your hair, the pride of our land? The beauty that made kings and queens travel to see you?" No one answered. Amaka covered her face. Chika began to cry silently. The others looked at the ground, wishing the earth would open and swallow them. The crowd began to murmur. Shame moved like smoke through the air. Inside the hearts of the maidens, something had broken, not just their hair, but their belief in themselves and in what they had chased. The square was quiet, too quiet. The maidens stood with their bald heads uncovered. Some cried, some looked away. Some could not even breathe. The king's eyes burned with rage, his fists clenched by his side, his voice thundered through the crowd. "What happened to your hair? Who did this to you?" No one spoke. The king turned sharply to Amaka. His voice lowered, but it was heavy. "Amaka, you were the pride of this village. Speak. Tell me what happened." Amaka's lips trembled. Her legs shook. Her eyes filled with tears she could no longer hold. She dropped to her knees. "My king. It was Zira." Gasps filled the air. "She promised us longer hair. She gave us oils and magic and lies. We believed her. We all believed her. We were desperate to be chosen, to be beautiful, to win." The king turned to his guards. "Find her, now." Zira, who had been slowly backing away toward the trees, turned to run. But the guards were faster. They grabbed her by both arms and dragged her to the middle of the square. Her long, beautiful hair still shimmered under the sun. She looked around with wide eyes, her smile gone. "Let go of me!" she shouted, twisting. "I did nothing wrong!" The king stepped forward. Then something strange and unexpected happened. One of the guards reached up and pulled Zira forcefully. Then her hair fell off. The village gasped as Zira's hair came off. A wig. A long, beautiful wig. Beneath it, her head was bald. Shiny, smooth, empty. The same as the maidens. Cries rose from the crowd. Some women covered their mouths, others turned away. The king stepped back in shock. You deceived us all," he whispered. Zira fell to her knees, silent now, breathing hard. The chief priest stepped forward, holding a small calabash. He muttered a chant and threw a handful of white powder into Zira's face. She screamed. She clutched her stomach and began to shake. Her eyes rolled and she fell forward, mouth open. And then she began to vomit. Hair. Long strands, curled strands, thick braids, twists, textures, all colors. The village watched in horror as piles of hair poured from her mouth like snakes, hair she had taken, hair she had eaten. The maiden screamed, "That's my braid! That one was mine! I wore that style last month!" Zira lay on the ground, still and empty, the hair scattered all around her. The chief priest looked at the king. "Dark magic," he said. "She fed on their beauty, their pride, their hope." The king's voice was quiet now. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you do this?" Zira lifted her head slowly. Her voice was low, hollow. "Because no one ever loved me. No one ever called me beautiful. They laughed at me. They threw me away. I came back to make them feel what I felt. The villagers stood frozen. The truth was out, but the pain was only just beginning. The king stepped forward slowly. "Who are you really?" he asked, voice softer now, filled with something between anger and pity. Zira raised her head. Her eyes looked tired, not angry, just tired. "You want to know who I am?" she said, her voice rough like dry wind. "Then listen." She closed her eyes and began to speak. Many years ago, a baby girl was born in this village, but something was wrong. She was bald, no hair at all, not even a single strand. Gasps echoed in the crowd. Some elders began to murmur. "You all believed that every child from Amuru must be born with long, soft hair. You called it the blessing of the gods. So when I was born, without hair, you said I was cursed." Her voice cracked. "You didn't even give me a chance to grow. You didn't wait to see if the hair would come later. You didn't show me love. You threw me away, into the jungle." More gasps. A woman in the crowd covered her face. Another shook her head in disbelief. Zira looked up at the king. The king's eyes widened, lips parting slowly, but no words came out. "I was just a baby, cold, alone. I cried, but no one came. Until one night. They found me." "Who?" someone whispered. "The spirits. The dark ones. The ones you pretend don't exist. They took me in, gave me powers, gave me protection, and gave me one mission: revenge." She looked around at the maidens, Amaka, Chika, and all the others, bald, broken, weeping. "You all laughed at girls like me. You pointed fingers. You made fun of anyone who didn't shine like you. You were just like the people who left me to die." A long silence followed. Then the king, voice trembling, asked, Is there a way to undo this? To return their hair? To make it right?" Zira shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "It's done. Their beauty, their pride, their crowns are gone forever, just like mine was." The maidens fell to their knees crying, loud, painful, deep cries that filled the village square like thunder. Some clutched their heads, others held each other. Amaka covered her face and wept. Chika sat alone, silent tears running down her cheeks. Zira stood slowly. "My work here is finished." The wind picked up. Dust swirled around her. Her body began to fade like smoke in the air. "I didn't want to become this," she said, "but you all made me." And with that, she vanished. No sound, no flash, just gone. The square was quiet again. But the silence left behind was heavier than any scream. The shame of what had happened hung in the air like heavy smoke. The once proud maidens now stood bareheaded and broken. The drums were quiet. The cheers were gone. Even the children, who usually laughed and danced, sat silently near their mothers. The king remained seated, eyes lowered, lips tight with sorrow. The day that was meant to celebrate beauty and crown a bride had become a day of grief. Then came the sound of footsteps. Slow, strong, calm. The crowd turned. A handsome young man walked into the square. He wore a simple but elegant wrapper and carried no crown, but his presence was heavy like rain before thunder. His eyes scanned the crowd, then rested on Adana. Her heart skipped. Obina. It was him. She gasped softly, too shocked to speak. The same stranger she had rescued in the bush. The same man she had fed with her last yam. The one who vanished without goodbye. But now, he walked toward the king. He bowed low. "My father," he said, "I have chosen my bride." The crowd gasped again. Obina was the prince. Adana's mouth fell open, her eyes filled with tears. Her knees felt weak. She had helped the prince, and never knew. He had eaten from her small bowl, slept on her floor, laughed with her under the stars. The king stood slowly, shocked. "Why did you hide yourself, my son?" Obina smiled gently. "Because I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to see the hearts of the maidens, not their hair, not their beauty, but their kindness." He turned and faced the crowd. "And only one girl gave me that. The others all ignored me. They cared more about their appearances than a hungry-looking stranger." His eyes found Adana again. "She gave me food when she had little. She cleaned my wounds. She asked for nothing. She never tried to impress me. She was mocked, but never stopped being kind." He walked to her slowly. "Adana," he said, "I did not forget you. I only hid the truth so I could return this way and ask you now." He knelt before her. "Will you be my queen?" Tears rolled down Adana's cheeks. She covered her mouth, too shocked to speak. But her heart screamed yes. The crowd began to clap, slowly at first, then louder and louder. Some cried, some bowed, some just stood still, unable to believe what they had just seen. The king stepped forward and placed his hands on their heads. "May your hearts stay clean. May your love be long. May your union bring healing to this land." And with those words, the village of Amuru saw something it had never seen before. A queen with short hair, a queen with no crown of beauty, but a crown of kindness. A queen who had once been mocked, now standing tall. And in that moment, everyone understood. Beauty is not in the hair. It is not in the face. It is in the heart. The drums began to beat again. The people danced once more. And under the golden sun, Adana smiled, her head lifted, her heart full, her story just beginning. Moral lesson: beauty is not what the eyes see. True beauty lives in the heart, in kindness, in humility, in love. The story of Adana reminds us that the world may laugh at what makes you different, but your difference may be your greatest strength. And the story of Zira reminds us that cruelty creates monsters, but kindness has the power to heal even what hatred has broken. Let no one ever make you feel less because of what you lack. Because in the end, it is not the hair on your head, but the light in your soul that makes you truly beautiful.